Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, in this session today we are going to talk about the Black American drama and theatre. In today's lecture we are going to discuss about the early phase, and in the next lecture we would be discussing on the later phase of the Black American drama and theatre. And for this we have again with us in our studios Dr. Bhim Sen Dahiya, and I would like to tell you all under the guidance of Dr. Dahiya we used to learn lots of new things. Sometimes we know those things in advance, and sometimes his input to the lectures give additional knowledge to us. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest, Professor Bhim Sen Dahiya. Hello sir, welcome to the EduSet lecture, and I hope that the session is going to be very interesting, because today we are going to discuss on the Black American drama and theatre.
Thank you. Well, before we launch upon the early phase of Black American drama, as way of introduction, I must repeat Michael Foucault's well-known thesis about power and knowledge. Knowledge has always been dominated by power. And America is a clear example of that. As I said, who is an American? American is the white American who came from Europe. Neither the people living before them, the Red Indians, they are not called Americans. They are called Red Indian Americans. Those who came after them, they are called Black Americans, the Negroes. Only they are the Americans. Now from Asia, a lot of people have settled there, from India, from China. They are called Asian Americans. So there has to be some qualifier for others. Only they are the power holders, therefore Americans. Similarly, American literature, if you read the history, there is a long history running into over 1500 pages on American literature by Spiller and three others. There again, American literature means written by the white Americans. Blacks are not included, Jews are not included, others are not included. Therefore, the blacks had to write their own. The Black American writer in 2 volumes. The first volume is on novel, the second volume on poetry and drama. Novel we have already talked about in 2 lectures. Now we will begin our talks on American drama. Now, more than any other form of writing, poetry or novel, drama had to face in America, I mean black drama, greater difficulties, greater hostilities, because drama primarily is written for the stage, and stage requires audience. Now the white audience would not allow the black writers to stage any of their dramas. Hostility, cultural hostility, racial hostility, color hostility. So it took a very long time to enter into Broadway theatre. So it was a difficult path, difficult journey for the Black American drama in the theatre. That is why it was almost the middle of the 20th century that they could find a way. Otherwise, American theatre has been there right from 17th century, when the establishment of America took place. So among all these difficulties, struggling went on for the black American dramatist, but with all the difficulties, all the hostility, and all the suffering, ultimately they established themselves, although it took quite some time. Well, opportunities, as I said, being rather scarce for black writers, much less so far, for the dramatist. Anyway, the first play by black American writer came out in 1858. Not a regular drama for the theater, but a musical, as they were called, some sort of drama, but you play on the music, and the blacks could only make fun of themselves. On that musical, they will present the black American as a sort of buffoon, sort of joker, and laugh on their own style of life, which would be considered primitive, uncultured, so on and so forth. So that is how the black American drama began in 1858. And this was done by the beginning. The beginning was made by these dramatists. William Brown was one of them, then Paul Dunbar, another, then James Johnson, the third one. These were the three pioneers of black drama in America. But as I said, it was not a regular drama to be staged on in the theater. It was a musical, and they wrote these musicals for the entertainment of the white people, laughing at themselves. One of these musicals became very popular. The title was Shuffle Along, Shuffle, Shuffle Along. So that is a comment on life for the blacks. Go on, the kind of life you have. But this was in 1921. So it took quite a while, almost 3/4 of a century, to get known. So Shuffle Along in 1921 made a mark. But again, as I said, it was a musical. It was all black musical, which became quite popular. The first black play to be produced on Broadway. Broadway now is the most well-known and prestigious theater group in New York. So unless a writer, a dramatist, succeeds in getting his play staged in the Broadway, he is not really rated as a great dramatist. So blacks obviously were not permitted to do that. And it was only in 1923, so in the 20th century, almost more than 2 centuries after Broadway had started, that the first black play, and that too was 1-act play, not 5-act or even 3-act. It was 1-act short play by Willis Richardson, Willis, Willis Richardson. And the title of the play was The Chip Woman's Fortune. The Chip Woman, woman apostrophe, The Chip Woman's Fortune in 1923. But this didn't last very long. It had performances only 2 weeks, which means 14 performances. Otherwise, the successful plays in Broadway, they will go on for over 100 performances and so on. The first full-length play was by Garland Anderson. Garland, G-A-R-L-A-N-D, Garland Anderson, A-N-D-E-R-S-O-N. His full-length play was Appearances. Appearances. First produced in 1925 and was also the first play to present a Negro full successful defense of himself from a false charge of rape. Now, this was the most popular theme in black literature and about black people in America in the 19th century, even in the 20th century, that any black man, if a white person gets annoyed, would get him booked by the police for rape. This was very common. So, this play deals with that theme. Appearances. So, this deals with the same theme of false charge of rape, but then this black man successfully defends himself and proves that the charge is false. So, it was for the first time that such a case was presented on the positive side of the blacks. 3 years later, another play came out. This was Meek Mouse, but mouse in the black American language, M-O-S-E, that's how they speak, they pronounce. Meek Mouse, actually Meek Mouse. This came out in 1928. And here we have a black protagonist who agrees for the removal of the blacks in a separate colony, means racial segregation between the whites and the blacks, which has been the practice for over 2 centuries. But then to buy peace with the whites, they agree to do that. And the final play to appear in Broadway in the 1920s was Harlem. Harlem, you know, is the most important tag for the blacks, because Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, that was the movement of black assertion, that they also are in America and they are also Americans and they must have equal rights. So it was a group of artists, painters, musicians, poets, novelists, prose writers, all got together and formed a sort of society, and they decided to even militantly assert their identity, black identity. So Harlem Renaissance is very important. It has a historical role to play. It played. And Meek Mouse, you say, is a part of that. But the most important was, as I said, Harlem itself. The title of the play was Harlem. This was by William Jordan Rapp, R-A-P-P. William Jordan Rapp. And of course, to make it popular, there is a lot of exoticism and even immorality in some scenes in the play. But that has to be done because otherwise it will not have very long run. Now in 1929, you know, the phenomenon of the Wall Street crash means economic depression in the entire West America as well as Western Europe included, not the Eastern. Eastern was free from it because of Marxism there. They didn't have any depression. But economic depression took over 1930s, and that's why even the Western writers in America, even in England, Auden Group, Steinbeck, others, they turned to Marxism because they thought the American liberalism had failed this classical economics, and therefore they must also think of something else. So that influence can be seen in the drama of the 1930s. And in the 30s, plays like Old Man Adam and His Children. Now in the black dialect, black American dialect, old will be OL, OL apostrophe, man Adam and his children. Children will be spelled as CHILLUN, children. That's how they will speak, pronounce. So, but actually children, old man Adam and his children. And it was followed by another. This was by Mark Connelly, Conelly, Mark Connelly. He was the author of Old Man Adam and His Children. The other to follow, equally important, was by Hall Johnson, Hall, Hall Johnson. And that was Run Little Chillin. Again, Run, Little Chillin. In 1932, James Miller, now you have lot of black plays in the 30s. In 1932, James Miller wrote Never No More. And by the way, James Miller was a white dramatist, but he always wrote on the black themes. And he was a great sympathizer and a friend of the blacks. So he was highlighting their problems in the American society, how they were being persecuted, so on and so forth. So that is the importance of James Miller as a white dramatist. So Never No More, which is a protest play against lynching. Lynching was very common, LYNCHING, publicly killing the blacks by hanging them, by just stoning them, beating them. So that was a public killing, was called lynching. And they will keep them hanging for days together on the tree so that it's a lesson for others. Then in 1934, John Wexley, Wexley, he presented a play, They Shall Not Die. So here is a message, no longer. So now they are asserting and fighting spirit is coming out. They shall not die. And it is based on an actual incident in which 9 Negro youths from Alabama were convicted of an alleged rape of 2 white prostitutes. Imagine. Wrong, false accusation. And they were killed, hanged, 9 of them together. Alabama is one of the southern states, and South in America, you know, has been most conservative. And all these blacks were mostly concentrated in the South. So if they wanted to escape to freedom, they always tried to escape to the North, because North was inhabited by liberal people and industry was dominant there. But in the South it was plantation, agriculture, and the blacks always worked as agricultural labor, and they were ill-treated like slaves. So they continued to be slaves right up to 20th century. And it is this that they are fighting against. And you can see as late as 1934, such a thing could happen It is based on an actual incident in which 9 Negro youths from Alabama were convicted of an alleged rape of 2 white prostitutes. In 1934 also came another black playwright, Dennis Donahue, Donghue, difficult spelling, but that's how the blacks do it, Donahue. 1934, a black playwright who wrote Legal Murders. That's what the whites were doing. Legal murders of the blacks. Make out a false case of rape and legally execute them. So they were persecuted for false accusations. That's why the play is titled Legal Murder. And this again is based on an actual incident. Another version of the Alabama case, the same case. It is rewritten here, Legal Murder. The point these plays made was the legal use of rape for false implication of the black Americans. Now come more important writers like Langston Hughes. You remember Langston Hughes was a poet, and he wrote then some plays also. Not as successful a playwright as he was a poet, but still, since he was a poet, he wrote poetic drama. And that was in 1935. He produced his famous play Miletto, Mulatto. Now, mulatto is a mixed breed where one parent is white and the other is black. So their children are called mulattoes. So this play is Miletto, 1935, by Langston Hughes. It's an emotional drama, sorry, but it is marred by melodrama and propaganda. Well, that was Langston Hughes' weakness, the kind of things he was doing in poetry. In poetry, propaganda may go, but in drama it becomes too obvious and too theatrical. So it was melodramatic, which rather spoiled the play, and propaganda also. It depicts conflict between a white colonel and his yard child. Now this term yard child is again very important socially, because these were the children whom the white masters would illegitimately produce by seducing their maids and other black servants, and never own them. They will not own them. That's why they were called yard children. So here is a story of a white colonel and his yard child. The child, of course, hates because the father never owns him. So when Norwood threatens to kill Brett is that black boy, that mulatto, because his father is Norwood, this colonel. So when he threatens to kill this boy, who is now a college-going young man, and he threatens to kill him because his fault is, his crime is that he has defied a white woman. If a white person asks you to do something, you have no business to say no. If you say no, you can even be killed legitimately. Another crime that he commits is he drives faster than a white man. So you can't drive car, you can't bypass a white man's car. This again was a crime. And third was, he enters by the first door of the house. Blacks are not supposed to enter by the front door. They must come like the servants by the back door. So the young man has committed all these crimes, and the colonel now, the white one, Norwood, he wants to kill him. But the boy kills the colonel. The young man kills the colonel instead and flees, runs away. So that is what the play is about, Miletto. The theme of protest was continued off Broadway. In Langston Hughes, Don't You Want to Be Free? Yeah, he must write direct message. Don't you want to be free? That was in 1937. This will not be acceptable on the Broadway, therefore this was played elsewhere. So off Broadway. And again, it's a musical history of blacks in America. It covers the entire history from beginning to end. And then another by Theodore Ward, another dramatist, Theodore, Theodore, Ward''S. And the play was Big White Fog. Yeah, that is significant. You see, fog can hold you, can surround you, but after all, it is a fog. You can walk through it, walk across it. So they consider the white people as fog, which has to be cleared. Now they have to got clear of the white fog. This came out in 1940 by Theodore Ward. Although it lasted only 64 performances, Big White Fog dramatized a black man's frustrated and tragic existence more bitterly than was done by any other play previously. The decade of protest reached its climax in Richard Wright's Native Son. You remember? Native Son was the novel which came out in 1941, most radical novel. But then it was converted into a play. It was adapted by Paul Green. Paul Green was a dramatist who converted the novel into a drama. He was a white regional dramatist who had written more plays about Negroes. So another Paul Green, a white dramatist who had written more plays about Negroes than any other dramatist. Bigger Thomas, is the hero of this play, an earlier novel, Native Son. Richard Wright is the most important black writer in American history. Bigger Thomas, a black young man. He lives in a rat-infested room in Chicago's black ghetto. They were called ghettos, where these blacks lived. So he is hired as a chauffeur by the Daltons, the Dalton family, who were white liberals, who derived part of their income from slum houses, owning slum houses, renting them to the black people. Now, Bigger Thomas's job is to drive Dalton's daughter Mary for evening classes to the University of Chicago. Mary instead visits her communist sweetheart, Jan. She doesn't go to classes. Instead, she goes there. Bigger assists the drunken girl to the room where he is surprised by her blind mother. He wants to leave her at her place. But in the house, there is her blind mother also. Now this man, Bigger Thomas, he gets panicky. He thinks now he will be spotted, that he is with the girl, and therefore he'll be killed. So he assists the drunken girl to a room where he is surprised by her blind mother. Fearing that he will be discovered and accused of rape, Bigger accidentally smothers the girl while trying to prevent her from speaking to her mother. So he catches her by the mouth, but in the scuffle she is killed. Fearing that he will be discovered, etc., etc. Yes. After a melodramatic chase during which Bigger rapes and kills his Negro sweetheart, he is finally caught, then legally tried and executed as usual. So that is the story of the black man in America. I think we'll leave some time for your questions.
Definitely, sir. You have given deep insight into the topic, that is the Black American drama and theatre, and we discussed on the early phase, and as you explained how things started and how things went further. Now I would like to ask you, could we say that with the advent or with the rise of the drama and theatre stage in the Black Americans literature, it brought some kind of a revolution?
Yes, certainly. Because drama is the most powerful literary form of presentation. Poetry one can read in private, novel one can read in private, but drama has to be seen in public, theatre, and it can carry the message across a wider spectrum of society. Therefore, the protest of the blacks, which had been there right from the 18th century, in poetry, in novel, but was not really very effective. It was only in the 20th century, after 1920s, after the Harlem Renaissance, that when blacks reached the theatre, of course they had to face a lot of difficulties, lot of hostility. The white hoodlums, for example, they will destroy their theatre, they will throw away their things, and they will make them run away, so on and so forth. But then they persisted and continued with all the torture and suffering. Finally they succeeded in making their point, in making their voice heard, and they staged these plays, and then more and more mature plays came to be written.
Thus we can say that their plight was brought towards all what atrocities were being carried towards them. Now the question arises, as we talk about the revolution, their plight, the themes which they used to carry depends on the atrocities only?
Yes, largely. And but then, as you said, this did bring about a revolution. I give you an example. In 1954, William Branch, he presented a play called Splendid Error. Splendid Error. Now here he emphasizes the theme of racial segregation, which was carried in all, departments of life. For example, in education, the black boys could not be admitted to a class where there were white students. Now in this play, he mixes them and shows how, despite resistance, despite hostility, despite attacks on them, they are persisting to mix up. And coming back to your theme of revolution, this play had such an impact on the public that in 1954, the Supreme Court of America passed a judgment which became a law that henceforth there will be no segregation of the students. Blacks and whites, they will study together in the same schools. So it finally had an impact and did bring about a revolutionary change, reformation.
So in this way we could say that yes, it brought the change, and as far as the messages if we go towards the messages they try to bring through these theatres, through these dramas, were directly reach to the people. As you said, one of the don't you want to be free, like such messages were given to the public. Do you feel so, like such messages it directly motivated people? Yes, they have particular rights, or yes, they should think towards particular things.
Yeah, exactly, and that is why you see minority literature, wherever it is, it does not get assimilated into the mainstream, because in terms of art, it cannot be considered very great, because great art is not propagandist. Great art is not aggressive. Great art is not militant. But you see, minority literature has to be that, because otherwise they don't find any space in the mainstream literature, as in mainstream life of any country. Here, for example, these days you find Dalits are very militant. If you read their writings, if you hear their songs, I heard in Punjab the kind of militancy they were voicing through songs. You see, your blood boils. And similarly, say in Maharashtra, in Marathi, there are Dalit playwrights who write this kind of strong stuff. So that's very natural with the minorities, because they have been oppressed long enough to make them militant, and therefore it is very natural with them to write propagandist literature rather than great, proper, balanced, equipoised literature.
Sure, sir. Now there is one other question which appears all of a sudden. We talked about the criticism part, of course, when black writers or the black theatrists were writing or playing against the white. Was there a rise in a sense that the black theatrist or the black drama suddenly got appreciation, not from the point of view expressing their plights, but as a drama, as an art?
Yeah, that took quite a while, because the propagandist literature or protest literature has its limitations, as I said. As a social message, it does all right. It does it effectively. But in terms of art, it has to be much more, because art has to be universal to survive, and it will survive and it will be universal only when it can speak to all generations. Now, these social phenomena like injustice, protest, they are dated. They don't continue for all times, and therefore they have only historical interest. They are of interest in the 1920s, but in the 1950s they are irrelevant. So to qualify to be great literature, you have to rise above the local, and you have to aim at universal, some human experience which will remain true to all times. Why do we keep reading our epics, for example, or great writers like Shakespeare, or Kalidas, or Tulsidas, or Premchand? Because they have written human stories which speak to you in all times of history. They were true 2000 years ago, they are true even today. So basic human fundamental emotions, sentiments, aspirations of mankind, if you can dramatize them, if you can form narrative about them, then it will become great art. But if you aim at the local situation, now local situation is local and it is dated, it will not remain for all times.
Definitely, because there is a phase, and with that phase, we try to bring out all the atrocities or all the goods and bads for the society to predict and to decide and to change accordingly. Sir, as you explained in the lecture itself, there that with the certain terminologies as we used, yard child, mulattoes, lynching, with the help of the American drama and theatre, do these terms were highlighted more, or the conditions behind those terminologies were highlighted more?
Well, both. They were highlighted, but as I said, they remained outside the mainstream. Even today, black American writer, black American drama or novel or poetry, it never got accepted as the mainstream. So only the special interest, special attention, special knowledge, a particular course, you will be paying attention to it, not otherwise. So that is the problem with it. But at the same time, it is a great weapon in the hands of those who want justice ensured for them. So there is no other way. And drama, theatre is the most powerful, means of putting your protest across, making it known to everybody, making it public. So that's why drama has been wooed by people having this agenda of propagating something or highlighting something.
Yes, sir. As we have very less time left with us, but there is a query, my personal query in fact. Did a stage came when the black theatre or the white theatre amalgamated, or black theatre adopted white theatre, or white theatre adopted or appreciated, or they were amalgamated together?
Yes, it took a very long time. As I said, Broadway was exclusively for the white dramatists, because they had prejudice against the black dramatist, and they thought they would be writing that local stuff or partisan stuff or racial stuff, and therefore not of interest to everybody. But then gradually they qualified, they came of age. It took them more than a century to do that. But in the later 20th century, I mean after World War II, they came of age. And even the black dramatists writing about the white people, or white dramatists writing about the black people. Now these things started getting accepted on both sides, and therefore it got assimilated, integrated with each other, and this became a real American drama of interest to every segment of society, not merely to one or the other. So you are right, but it took a very long time, over a century, in fact 2 centuries, to reach that stage of assimilation and integration.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for giving deep insight into the very topic, the Black American drama and theatre. Today we discussed the early phase of the Black American drama and theatre, and I would like to tell you all that tomorrow we would be discussing on the later phase of the Black American drama and theatre. We would like to thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for giving your precious time, and I would like to tell you all that if you want to access this particular lecture, you can access it with the help of the YouTube. As we always say, that we daily upload our lectures on YouTube, so that you can easily search for the content and enlighten yourselves. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.